Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of the Retirement Readiness Podcast. As always, we have Tim Regan, the founder and wealth partner at Prairie View.
Hey, Katie.
And I'm Katie Umlin. So today we're talking about grandparenting in retirement. Talking about how to invest for your grandchildren, some 529 things, if you're taking care of your grandkids, and then just retirement and happiness. Okay, so grandparenting in retirement.
Tell me all of your years of experience.
Yeah,
Katie.
right. No. I came with a full list of, I know exactly what to do.
It's funny because I think that like for both of us, we're fortunate that we've got really good examples of good grandparents in our kids' lives. And so I think at least via kind of proxy, we can kind of get a feel for what that looks like. And, and it's amazing to me how many times in our business clients come in talking about their grandkids, talking about what works, what doesn't work, and the amount of things that we can see and what does make you truly happy in retirement, especially when it comes to your grandchildren.
I think that's got to be a
huge.
large part of your retirement is your grandkids.
Yeah.
And I think it's so funny to see, like, I'm sure this is of a lot of grandparents that the grandkids, the ages range have a huge spectrum. So the grandparents you were when your first grandkids were born compared to your, 10 years later, the next, I feel like there's always a wide range. You get older.
You see it with your own kids, let alone with your grandkids. Yeah. It's a huge
You learn more the more you become grandparents. So I think that probably changes and evolves.
Yeah. Well, I remember, and it's funny too. So when Sarah and I were having our kids and stuff, and a big part of us having kids was at some point we wanted to have grandkids, because the idea of having that empty house wasn't for us. Our idea was it would be really good to have full house with kids and then a full house with grandkids, and I think in our mind that's a pretty big piece to our retirement happiness. And when you talk about that transition or that spectrum, I guess, of how people are with their grandkids, we've been able to live it. Us both being the oldest, we had the oldest grandchild in both families. We had the only grandkids for a period of time.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because we would come home from Christmas and our dining room would be delegated as the present room. And we would, because literally Sarah's always driven these big SUVs and the back of the truck would be filled because for some reason, grandmas and grandpas think that those first grandkids, we got to pile them full of Christmas presents. And like, we're almost crying uncle. Like it was overwhelming.
And even aunts and uncles.
Oh yeah.
Like before they have kids, it's like everybody's focused on these grandkids.
Yeah. And so now I look at that whole kind of that evolution, and now what's mom at 12 or 13?
13
yeah. That it's just much different than
and you think about like it's just so funny that as they get older, like your kids' grandparents are different than my kids' grandparents with the same.
Yeah.
And your parents were different than my parents.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 100%. Yeah. How about it? We always laugh or think about that. I do, at least, about how literally mom and dad were very young when we had our grandkids. And so it was almost like
I was still a kid. I was 8 when you had your grandkid, or when you had your first child and mom and dad's grandchild.
And so even if we look at that and we start talking through kind of like what that retirement and happiness looks like with grandkids, I think you can look at that spectrum and it means different things throughout. I know one of the things that we've witnessed, I think in our family, but also with clients, is that it's finding that right mix of what is our role, how frequently, where are we at, what, all that kind of stuff. I know we'll see many times the two ends of it, where you have grandparents that aren't super happy because they only see their grandkids at Christmas and Easter and they don't really get to see them much other than that. And then we have it the other way where they're like, we babysit 4 days a week, every week. It's a lot and it's more than, and so it's just, it's funny. It's finding that right balance.
Well, and I think it's the right balance of everything and also a spectrum. So maybe when you first had your grandkids, mom and dad were still raising me and they still had their own family. So maybe they weren't investing for your kids
Oh, sure.
because they
Well,
were still
absolutely. Yeah. Well, and they were
spending money
still
on their,
both
you know,
working full time, both saving for their retirement, but like they were just in a completely different
just a
phase of
different
life.
phase, and they're still, and it's the same thing. How involved can we be with your kids? We have kids. We're still working.
Yeah,
It's different.
it
And
is.
now mom's retired. Maybe she is investing for the kids. Maybe she is spending more time. Like, it's just, you might have started as a grandparent and be in a completely different spot now
Yeah.
than when you first started.
Well, and it's funny because I kind of think the same thing happens with kids, depending on, what your life trajectory looks like. But that traditional, I have kids when I'm younger, uh, and and as I'm earlier in my career, and then I progress. So it's kind of like even in our lifestyle, I had mom and dad when they were young. You had them when they had money, right?
Right.
And so it's
Yeah.
like,
Dad always said, you got their youth and I got their money.
yeah, yeah, exactly, right. And so it's funny. I think it's the same thing with grandparenting.
Hmm.
When they're young, they have the wherewithal to play catch or to wrestle or to whatever you want to do. But they don't necessarily always have as much time, and they don't have as much
Right.
resources and that kind of stuff. And so I think that as people start thinking about this concept of grandparenting and what does that mean, I think it's like a lot of other things. If you take a minute and kind of step back and think about intentionally, what do we want this relationship to look like? What do we want our lifestyle to look like? I think you can get to a really happy place and kind of check all the boxes. Where we see things not work real well is when people aren't intentional and they don't think about what do I want, and they just let life happen, and all of a sudden they end up in a place where maybe they could have been in a better place. Uh,
Well,
some
and maybe you can, as you were kind of talking, it kind of triggered some things in my brain. Like, maybe you can talk a little bit about, like, some of your grandkids might have different needs than other grandkids. Like, what do you see in the business? Do you see?
yeah, 1,000%. Uh, and so we have some clients that will have the desire with grandchildren to help them out, right? And when you talk about having different needs, it comes in a lot of varieties. Most of our clients have children that are in different socioeconomic places, and they'll feel like I want to make everything equal, but that's not really what would be the most helpful, right? I have one child who is super successful and their kids won't have to worry about paying for college. I have another child who is a social worker and is maybe a single parent, and they don't have as many resources, and their kids are going to have to worry about that. And so sometimes the conversation is more about what's the outcome we're looking for rather than making sure everything's exactly equal. And then the same thing kind of goes to other needs as well. Sometimes we'll have clients that have grandchildren with extra needs. Maybe they have hearing issues and they need expensive hearing aids, or maybe they have some learning issues and going to some extra tutoring or things would be helpful. Um, and so for them, maybe the college funding, the 529, that kind of stuff isn't where they want to invest their money. Maybe they want to invest their money in some other things while they're growing up. So absolutely, there's a whole spectrum. And that's kind of where it goes back to, if you think about what's the desired result, what are we trying to accomplish here? That usually answers a lot of questions with how do we go about doing it.
So you can kind of help lead that discussion with clients
We have led that discussion a
a
lot.
lot. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And it's funny because most of the time, uh, if you have two spouses in retirement, most of the time those spouses are pretty much on the same page, but there are times when they're not. And
Hmm.
so what can happen is, if I think both spouses can go into, uh, I guess maybe I could, when you're thinking about a major decision, usually hey, we've got this big decision. Should we buy a new car? Should we not? Should we buy a lake house? Should we not? And so then
You
spouses come
should not.
together. Yes, ever, right?
from
From
from my
experience.
experience, you should
Not.
not.
Lake house. the and so uh and so a lot of times when you have those big decisions, you go into it and you have a thoughtful conversation and you weigh out the pros and cons and you come up with a decision. But when you're in retirement or nearing retirement and you start having grandchildren, that doesn't seem like a decision. That's just something that kind of happens and you're excited about it. And But what can happen is if you don't treat it almost like a decision, then you can have two spouses that end up on different pages where uh, I'll use our family. I don't know that this where we'll be, but let's say that Sarah and I get into retirement and Sarah says in her mind, I don't want our grandkids ever to go to daycare. I want to be the one that cares for our grandkids. What if in my mind, I'm thinking we're traveling, I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking we're free, we're going to do whatever we want to do, but now we're tied down with these grandkids. And if we never had that conversation, because you didn't think that this is a decision, you just
Right.
kind of went into it. That's where we see people kind of not end up as happy as they can be in retirement, is when the thoughtfulness around what do we really want to have happen here, and it kind of goes in a couple of categories. One is the relationship. How frequently do we want to see them? What do we want to do? That kind of stuff. Secondly, though, it's the money. How, when it comes to Christmas, we're going to spend, I don't know, pick a number, $200 on the kids. Well, do we need to buy them $200 worth of presents and
Mm-hmm.
tchotchkes that'll be broken in a week and a half or forgotten about? Or do we want to give $50 worth of toys so they have something to open? But let's put $150 into their college fund or whatever we want to call it.
Yeah. So while you're saying that, let's talk about 529s.
Yeah, great.
So I know what a 529 is.
Yes.
529 is a college planning, let's say, account, I
Yep.
guess,
Yeah.
that can be, now there's new rules and you can convert more to a Roth IRA with less penalties
Yes.
than
Yes.
before.
That's right.
Okay, so now
All
you
right.
tell me.
Now, can I fill in some of those
Yes.
gaps? Yeah. So, so absolutely. So, 529 is a great way for grandparents to save if they know their kids or grandchildren are going to potentially want to go off to college. It's what happens with the 529 is you put the money in, and it grows tax deferred. If the kids use the money for college, they can take all of that money out tax free. The issue that with the 529s used to be that if you pile all this money into a 529, what happens if they never go to college?
Mm-hmm.
Now you've got this whole mess that you have to figure out. And they do have now ways that you can take some of that 529 money, use it as a Roth contribution on their behalf. If they never go to school, or if you oversaved, maybe you've got too much money and they got a bunch of
Too much money,
scholarships.
more money, more problems.
Yeah, that's right. And so there's ways that they can take it and put it into a Roth IRA. What we find, though, what our suggestion is with most of our grandparents, uh, it goes back to what do you want the money to do? And many times grandparents want to help pay for a college education, but really what they're talking about is they want to help their grandchild get a start in life.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's college, whether that's, hey, maybe mom and dad took care of college, let me help them buy a house or
Mm-hmm.
what have you. And so many times, unless we have a grandparent who's in the situation where they're trying to reduce their estate tax that they have to pay and they're looking to do significant gifting, many times we actually use what's called a custodial account. A custodial account allows you to earn the first, I'm going to say the number wrong, $1,500 to $2,000 a year. It's inflated. It goes up for inflation. That's why I don't know the exact number, but it allows you to earn that much money tax free at the child's rate anyway. You have to have quite a bit of money in the account before you start earning that kind of money on an annual basis. And so from our perspective, 529s are great tools, but we many times will start with a custodial account. The custodial account for the most part is going to be tax free, and the kids can use it for whatever they want.
Yeah.
In that custodial account, the grandparent still stays the custodian, which means they control the money until the child turns 21.
Okay.
So if you get to 18 and the kid's a derelict,
Yeah.
like you can have some flexibility around how do they get that money, when do they get it, and we found that gives more flexibility, and so give that a different twist. So let's say that you're a grandparent and your grandchildren is born and you start putting money away for them on a regular basis. And then that grandchild gets into high school and has the opportunity to go to a really high-end, expensive band camp. And mom and dad maybe don't have the money to pay for it. You could dip into that custodial account
Sure.
and say, hey, I'll help with that. so they have that opportunity or whatever that is, fill in the blank. And so from our perspective, especially with younger grandkids, that custodial account just gives more flexibility than the 529.
So would expensive band camp or like spring break,
Yep.
like
Girls Gone Wild.
one of
Yep.
the two?
Sign me up. Yeah. And so I think a lot of times, uh, those are the things that when we see when you think about grandparenting and you see people in retirement, the things that when we talk about what's that desired outcome, it really starts to look like, let's say that most people don't have unlimited funds, right? I have a finite amount of money that I can spend. And so you're going to put money aside for your grandchild, maybe 529, maybe custodial account. They can be invested in virtually identical investments. So it's not like one's going to earn more or earn less. But before we get to that phase, is is saving for their future the number one thing on your list? Or if you have finite dollars, what would it look like if you took that money and every year you took your family on a vacation?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, maybe you say, well, their future, let mom and dad take care of that. Let me try to create some memories or some moments with my grandkids. And that's important.
Mm-hmm.
So it really just comes down to being intentional and saying, how do I want to allocate, which is the same thing you do in every other part of life. But it's really saying, how do I want to be intentional with my time and with my money when it comes to being
Well,
a grandparent?
that's back to that two-comma lifestyle of how do you want your life to look? It doesn't have to be planning. It doesn't just have to be grandparents pay for college. It can be
Absolutely.
taking them on vacations. It can be taking them to get new school clothes at the beginning of school or whatever you want
Which
it
is
to
something
be.
like, so it's so funny. I think about that a lot. And I wonder how much my kids are missing out on things. Because when we were growing up, you got clothes like basically 2 times, maybe 3 times a year. You got clothes at the beginning of school,
Mm-hmm.
and then I always got a pair of tennis shoes or gym shoes that I used either for gym at school or for basketball. So I kind of have a new pair at the beginning of school. Then I got kind of like a new pair when I was done with my gym shoes.
Yeah,
Maybe I got some clothes at Christmas and maybe my birthday, but
maybe
that's
that's
like
it.
it,
Yeah,
right? Where now it's like, oh, Amazon one click.
I
Oh,
know.
so I wonder how much we're missing out on some
Well,
of that.
we just had this talk because our son Dylan is very into hockey right now. He's 2. And we're at Dick's Sporting Goods and he had found a hockey helmet. It was a goalie helmet. He loved it. He wouldn't take it off. He was so happy in it. And we wanted to get it for him.
Yeah.
And we're like, no.
No.
He's 2. He does not need a professional goalie helmet. Like, let him want.
Yes.
Let him
Yes.
want some things.
Absolutely. Well, which really goes back to, if some of being a grandparent is spoiling the grandkids.
Yes.
Um, but some of being a grandparent too is helping to spoil them in the ways that you think are right. You know
Right.
what I mean? And a lot of times I know we talk about books that are that I read, and one of those books was written by, his name just went out of my mind, Jordan Peterson, and it's the 12 Rules of Life, the Antidote to Chaos, or something like that. And one of them is, don't raise kids that are jerks, right? Or raise kids that you love or want to spend time with.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you see that spoiling turns into kids that I don't want to spend time with, and which then makes for an unhappy grandparenting experience as well.
Okay, so let's talk about maybe you are raising your grandchildren. So how does that?
Yeah, well, you pray that doesn't end up the case, right?
Yeah, in pretty much any capacity. That's not
a good,
probably you're not first.
not a good outcome. Yeah, and I think there a lot of times we'll have people that think through or want to know about, are there special benefits or
Like social security benefits.
yeah, all that kind of stuff. And what really happens is it's dependent upon the situation that has those kids in your care. Um, if mom or dad has passed away, then they are entitled to social security benefits based on mom and dad's earnings. But if they're in your care because of maybe some domestic things that are going on or a bad situation that way, usually there's not a whole lot that you can collect from the state, if you will, or from some sort of benefit. And so I think with that, that's still back to kind of that conversation around, how do we then manage that? What does that look like? Um, which is really the hard thing, because it links a little bit to the grandma and grandpa that babysit the kids all the time, because now you're not grandma and grandpa anymore.
Right.
Now you're mom or dad, you're the disciplinarian,
Mm-hmm.
you're all of those things. And I think that there's a shift that has to happen from a mental perspective that really says, okay, I have to kind of shift gears, shift down back into that parenting role versus the grandma and grandpa role.
Yeah, I think it's just a different mindset if you're grandparenting Monday through or parenting
Yeah.
Monday through Friday and then grandparenting on the weekends
Yeah.
that's got to be tough.
Yeah. Well, and I know that for us, a big part of the whole how do I put together my financial plan, and it kind of goes back to, Katie, even your comment around that 2 comma lifestyle. Um, part of our philosophy is that everybody's kind of stuck in this fishbowl. And when I think about a fishbowl, I think about a goldfish, and the goldfish can only grow the size of the bowl that it's
Mm-hmm.
in. And I can go into a whole lot of reasons why that is, but just it does. And so the bigger the bowl, the bigger that the fish grows. And so we all think about what's possible through the lens of what we think is in our bowl. Uh, and so when we think about grandparenting, we think about being happy in retirement, we think about how does all of that come together. Part of it is saying, what limiting thoughts do I have that's keeping me from fully experiencing that happiness in retirement? And how could I potentially break outside of that bowl and get to a bigger perspective? And that's where a lot of times we have grandparents that'll come in that they don't even think that taking their family on a vacation is a possibility. That's not what their background was. That's not what they,
Mm-hmm.
it was always, no, I got to save, 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 save. And now all of a sudden I'm in retirement. I don't want to spend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe you can.
Or just you grew up in your fishbowl, your grandparents didn't take you on vacation, so you don't. It doesn't even
Yeah.
enter your mind as a something you can
Possibility.
do.
Absolutely. And same thing even we see with like sporting events. Kids today many times are overscheduled sometimes. And like with grandparents, they might not think about uh yeah, they want to go to the games, but there might be other ways that they might want to support that child too. And maybe there's a away tournament, and grandma or grandpa says, I'm taking you to the away tournament.
Yeah.
Or there's a camp that the kids are going to go to, when they form a vacation around that or whatever. I mean, there's things that can be done that not all the time do people think about or want to do.
And that's the fun stuff.
It
It's
is.
like,
It is.
what can we possibly do?
Absolutely. And that's where, sitting down and really knowing what is it that we're trying to create, and then how do we apply our time and our money to it. That one of the things that I like to encourage people to think about is, if you were to sit down right now and say, I've got another 2 years with my grandkids, what would I do in that 2 years? Right? Let's say I know I've got a finite, it's 2 years. What would I do? And then look and say, does my calendar and my checkbook reflect that?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And now let's get in alignment with your calendar and your checkbook to check the boxes of, this is what I would want to do.
Yeah, I think that's the idea of, you get to design your life. Every time we kind of go down that road, it's so exciting.
It is.
Whether you're 20, 30, 70, like, I think that is so exciting.
It is. Well, and the thing that I like to think in the back of my mind always, or keep in the back of my mind, is the next 5 years are going to go by regardless.
No matter what.
No matter what, they're going to go by.
Mm-hmm.
So do I want to be standing 5 years from now saying I wish or I did?
Right.
And that's true throughout every part of life. So it's exciting.
It can be exciting and overwhelming, and
Absolutely.
but I feel mostly excited about the idea
those
of that.
possibilities. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, should we jump into? Well, do you have any final thoughts? I guess.
No.
Okay. Should we jump to a mailbag? We actually have.
Do you have a mailbag?
We have a question
All
today.
right, awesome. Which, by the way, I think Maddie comes home from school sometime mid-May or so, and her and Grace, I'm going to tie them down and say, listen, this day we are getting Ruby
in here.
Yes, get the mailbag deliverer done.
Good. So I don't know if this is somebody setting us up for this type of question, so we'll see how you answer this.
All right.
They wanted to know, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it right in front of me, about the election is coming up this year.
Yeah.
So they're trying to ensnare you. They said, should we vote for Republican, Democrat, and how does that influence our financial well-being?
Outstanding. Yeah. Which so I think the mailbag turned into, what don't you talk about at Thanksgiving?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
It's like, I can't ask this for real. So
Yeah. We put in.
those are the best mailbag questions.
So it's so funny because if you were to sit down with a Democrat, they would tell you that they're so afraid that Trump's going to get in that the whole world's going to blow up. If you talk to somebody who's a Republican, they'll just say, man, if Biden gets in, it's scary. The whole world's going to blow up. Right. And so everybody's got their views on that. And what reality turns out from an investment financial perspective, history would say that we don't care.
Yeah.
History would say that whether a Democrat is in or a Republican is in, there is no clear, the stock market does well in this case, the stock market does poor in another case. I personally believe that God will put the person in charge for us that we need. That doesn't, in my mind, that doesn't always mean that means prosperity. That doesn't always mean, sometimes you need somebody to come up with a trial for, or a challenging time. And that's what you need more than you need the the prosperity.
Sometimes you get what you need.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Yeah. And that concludes the karaoke part of our show.
That does not conclude.
Yeah. And so really, I think it doesn't matter. I think that regardless of who is elected, we have one of the greatest things about this country is the checks and balances that we have. We can wring our hands over the divisiveness. We can wring our hands over, the two-party system. But at the end of the day, the way that it's structured really does have good checks and balances. And so that at this point, vote for who you want, because I don't know that it's going to make a huge difference from a financial perspective.
And if you live in Illinois, it doesn't probably matter anyway.
That does not matter anyway. Yeah, that's right.
So you started talking about Maddie being home in a few weeks. What else is going on in your house?
Our house is filled with lots
comings
of change.
and goings.
Lots of change, yeah. We've got, I think we shared before, Lily just bought her house. And so there's lots of projects and fun stuff that we're doing up there. It's kind of nice because that gives me a chance to connect with them a lot. Tim is wrestling with, does he go to an internship he's applied. He doesn't know if he'll get it or not. We're thinking not at this point, but there was an internship in DC that he was looking at for the summer. But he got a job in the fall when he goes back to school, working on a campaign for a senator. So that's
exciting. The campaign he was working on, did that wrap up?
It was successful. They got her on the ballot. Okay. And so he's got lots of good stuff happening there. Gracie, we actually leave this weekend to take her on her first round of college tours. Oh, okay. So that's exciting. We're going to do Xavier, which is where Tim's at. And we're going to do Dayton University, which we've never been. Dayton's brand new. It came up on the list as we were looking for really good elementary education programs. And
is Dayton in Dayton, Ohio?
It is.
Okay.
And what we liked about that is it's like 45 minutes from Tim. So the two of them can kind of be close, and it's kind of nice. So
he can give her a ride home because she's not driving.
She is not. She is not. Well, and then we got with Maddie. I mean, she's in the throes of figuring out this grad school stuff, whether she'll go to do a dual program for Master in Social Work and or JD, and just what all that looks like. And so the house is...
It's rocking again.
It is. All good things.
Just how Sarah likes it.
Yeah.
All the kids coming back.
Oh, yeah. Coming back for sure. All the change and going back away. Maybe
change
not
is
so
maybe
much.
Not.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody likes that.
Yeah. So your Dylan had a birthday, huh?
Yeah. Dylan's too. Very good. He had a football birthday and has not taken his hockey jerseys off. Every day he has a hockey jersey.
Has another
on.
hockey jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the hockey piece is primarily because his older cousin.
His big cousin plays hockey, and of course, whatever your big cousin does is
outstanding.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're all is good.
Good.
So thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Retirement Readiness Podcast. I heard that we have an ebook, right? So our ebook is on our website. If you're interested in learning about maximizing your Social Security benefits, check out the ebook on the website. You can download it there. So if you enjoyed this episode, like our Facebook page, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and in the meantime, we'll see you soon. Be well.
Be well.